but you can see the spread between how much they're being paid, with the average coming to about 100,000 across the board, but with the financial institutions and the banks really skewing the results one way. Chairperson fees, just to show that some companies are differentiating in terms of the remuneration and the perks of the chairman's role or the chairwoman's role. Finally, important section, general comments and feedback about what they felt about the economy and the sector. Prospects for growth, 15%, extremely confident, very confident. You have to realize this survey was conducted in September, October, so things were still not quite in place as far as showing the upward trend with the recent economic changes. So happy to note that people, despite all that, were feeling confident at the organization level. Business risk, corruption remains number one, inconsistent policies, political instability, poverty, inequality, infrastructure, and resource mobilization. These were the key economic risks as identified by those who responded to our survey. In terms of their corporate risk, regulatory compliance, number one. Succession planning, number two, again, harping back to the same point. Reputation, products, cybersecurity, again, going on to technology and disruption, crisis management. So all these issues that we've identified and the respondents have identified, we see that the survey results point to the need for greater work to be done in these particular areas. Again, this is back to the same question about whether technological disruptions, your company will be impacted in the next 3 years. Of course, big data, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain. So the understanding is there and the acceptance is there. However, little seems to be done in terms of data governance, in terms of making sure that they are equipped with the right skill set to be able to handle some of these challenges going forward. Finally, so implementation issues, just a snapshot of what we've seen with the Code of Corporate Governance. Hiring of independent directors remains an issue. Some of the issues we had identified earlier. Finding experienced female directors a myth, as far as I'm concerned, but still identified. Increase in administrative costs and unnecessary paper and foreign directors. Interestingly, the percentage of foreign directors has fallen from 46% to 36%. And whereas this is giving greater opportunities to local directors, we still feel that the know-how that some foreign directors bring along with best practices, perhaps we're missing out on that. So just to see if these are the main implementation issues, what has the 2019 code done? Independent directors remains, female directors hopefully remains. Administrative costs probably gone down with some of the compliant explained provisions, and clearance is not really dealt with. So if these are the implementation issues we're facing at the eve of the new reforms, what has the new one done to ease some of these implementation issues? Finally, for the regulator, and I always say these seminars are great, but the people who want to hear this are not there till later. And I believe the chairman of the SEC is coming at 12:30, just in time to say his bit, but not listen to what we have to say. But this is the feedback for the regulators: must behave as facilitators, should consider a local environment and consult with industry. Was it done? Not with PICG at least. Regulatory officials should be aware of the provision and what the overall aim is, not a box-ticking approach. If you want the regulators not to have a box-ticking approach, please, the regulators should not have a box-ticking approach. They should be independent of external influences. Appropriate time should be given for compliance with new regulations, should not come out and say comply tomorrow or as of yesterday. And consideration should be given for different size companies, something that we will be talking about a bit later on as well. So some food for thought, and I hope there is, and we will of course be sharing this with both sets of regulators to show how we can work together to try and ease some of these issues that have been identified by our respondents. So that's all we have. We're hoping that these surveys are done on a more regular basis and in coordination with the regulators, because we just have as much remit as we have in terms of getting respondent data. It's really like pulling teeth when you try and get people to fill out survey results. Having said that, we've done tremendously well compared to 3 years ago. We're very happy that I think these responses provide robust enough findings on the basis of which we can continue with the policy advocacy role. But we do hope that you as a community and the regulators will join hands, including the PSX now, to try and get the maximum number of responses so we really get the kind of responses we need to be able to implement the kind of changes that we need to do in the regulatory sphere. So that's all I have to say this morning. We'll be back with the panel discussion. Looking forward to Asad's talk. Also to let you know, copies of the full survey available at the back of the room at a phenomenal 40% discount. And here's my marketing hat on. So do get a copy, give us feedback about the survey, about the report, about the methodology. We're very happy to improve ourselves over time, and we look forward to a continuing dialogue with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sadia, for an excellent discourse on the survey, and I'm sure our audience here is much more wiser on the results by now. And as she has mentioned, the copy of the survey is available here, so you might get it while leaving. Now I would like to invite our second presenter, who needs no introduction, a very senior member of our profession and a distinguished sort of speaker, Mr. Asad Ali Shah. Please welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, good morning. First of all, thank you very much to ICAP and PICG, Adnan and Sadia for arranging this very important seminar. And also, thank you for inviting me to explain the comply or explain approach, because I'm very happy to admit that I am one of those who is guilty of this change. So if people who are not happy with this, you can always blame me for it. I have contributed to this. I have been talking about it for decades. I always thought that Pakistan's approach, which was rule-based approach, was not the right approach. So let me try to give you a little bit of background. I'll try to be as brief as possible. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is what I have in my presentation. But my focus will be to explain, what is the difference, why did we change from the rule-based to the comply or explain basis, and also how, and what should be the way forward, how the corporate governance needs to be implemented and promoted in this country for value creation. The basic issue, in my judgment, with our corporate governance since 2002, when it was introduced, and obviously I'm one of those who has been involved in some way or the other, either as an auditor or advisor to the corporate sector of Pakistan. I've been speaking on this topic for the last 18, 20 years, and I've seen all the changes that have taken place, and and we also have Mr. Masood Naqvi here, who was the original, one of those who started the corporate governance, I would say, movement in Pakistan, the first code. So what I have felt is that generally, over the last 18 years, I'm not saying that we have not benefited from the code of corporate governance. We have, definitely. There are people are, more aware of the corporate governance practices. But much of it has actually remained a box-ticking exercise. The real issue that, is that it has not been ingrained, and it is not reflecting in the culture of our corporate sector, including the listed companies. So that was the issue that I think which I believe needs to be addressed, and I believe that this is a better approach. So let's go to the next slide. So this is the overall regulator's perspective, why good corporate governance is required. Good corporate governance is not, I think we need to understand it is not an end in itself. It is a means to an end. And the means to create an environment of, basically the aim is to improve the market confidence and business integrity that supports capital market development and corporate access to equity capital for long-term productive investments. The quality of country's corporate governance framework is therefore of decisive importance for the dynamics and the competitiveness of the business sectors for improving the business performance and economy. So these are the fundamental reasons why the regulators promote corporate governance. So when we are looking at the corporate governance, the state of corporate governance, we have to ask our question, these very questions. 18 years of implementation of corporate governance, what have we achieved? What are the outcomes? Has this corporate governance resulted in improving the market confidence? Has it improved in a significant manner capital formation? Has it improved the performance of the businesses? So those are the fundamental questions when we are doing a survey. While I do appreciate great, and I will be talking about these surveys, and Sadia's survey, PICG survey is very relevant as it captures what are the current practices and what has, what people are doing and what some of the people are saying on the corporate governance practices. But I think some fundamental questions have not been raised in this survey, and these are the ones that I'm referring to. Next slide, please. In my judgment, there are two fundamental objectives of corporate governance. One is performance. And that is the company's objective of conducting its business so as to enhance corporate profit and long-term shareholder value. Now, this is the key. Capital formation is not possible, market confidence will not be possible unless businesses are successful, they are giving good returns to the shareholders, they are doing innovation, they are, and the performance is reflected in the bottom line. So question is, has our corporate governance resulted in corporate performance? This is another question. I'm not answering this question. I'm just saying this is another question that is of fundamental importance that needs to be raised. Other aspect is the public interest, accountability and reporting to shareholders and market participants to ensure market confidence. Obviously, this is also important, and obviously regulators are more concerned, but sometimes we are excessively concerned on this and totally ignore the first one. So when this balances out, even the second one is not achieved. So this has been one of the issues with our regulatory mindset, that we try to control everything. And in one of your slides, Sadia, when you referred to, when you talked about the regulators, your first point was facilitation. That has been missing. So again, I think the effort now is to move towards that side. Next. So just a very brief, I think we all are aware, not spend too much of time, but this is the journey. Started in 2002, the code was then updated in 2012, enforced through regulations after the Companies Act in 2017, and now in 2019, this changed. By the way, we have still not gone to comply or explain. We were afraid to move towards comply or explain. I would actually life to move further to comply or explain than we have done so far, because we are still hybrid. There are certain provisions which are still mandatory. We have not moved towards totally comply or explain. So, next. Next slide, please. So I'll try to give you, I think, some evidence of, what is the impact, and that is largely coming from 2007 IFC and ACCA survey, by the way. That was a very interesting survey, and I'll give you the views of some stakeholders, from that survey. I think I'll not go into PICG survey because Sadia has already covered it, but, in that survey, that is about the state of the different corporate governance practices. As I said, it is not giving, the status as to what are the outcomes of impact of corporate governance. And I think one aspect perhaps in this survey which was not covered was what are the investors saying? What are the shareholders saying? So I think it is overwhelmingly that survey is relying on the CEOs and CFOs and executives, but not the real people, the investors and the shareholders. So this was very interesting. The question asked from a chairman of the local listed company. So when he was asked about the importance of corporate governance, he said, not corporate governance, but code of corporate governance is important. I have to follow each and every word of the code. I do not understand why independent directors, audit committees, internal audit, and company secretaries are important, but the code wants them, and I need to have them. For me, the profitability of the company is important. I think the code has not increased the profitability of my company, even though we do have 4 meetings of the board, we have non-executive directors, we follow the code, but having all this has decreased my profits, not increased my profits. When I should be concentrating on business matters, I'm concentrating on internal audit reports. So why do I follow the code? Because I am the owner of a listed company and because the SECP wants us to follow the code. So this was the response of the chairman of a listed company. We may agree or disagree. Next, please. Next slide. Company secretary of a local listed company. Corporate governance is important because we have to follow the code of corporate governance. Benefits like the ones outlined by you relating to access to the foreign capital, institutional investors, increased reputation of business, all this does not matter to my company. What matters to the company is the survival of the business, and we need money for that. We can take a loan from the bank at any time, and they are not worried about our corporate governance practices. So why do we need to think of foreign capital or increased reputation or better governance? I only consider corporate governance important because the SECP wants me to consider it important. So this was another response, and this also highlights very important aspect that despite this whole corporate governance framework, the bankers are least interested in it. The local companies and our entrepreneurs who have good reputation and who have relationships, they can always borrow without, any evidence of, that it's not based on the corporate governance. So this is one point to be noted, that if you want good corporate governance, the lenders and the other capital providers, they need to be interested, they need to be convinced. Next. CFO of a listed company. We follow the code of corporate governance in terms of board composition, and our board of directors do all that code requires. We have to do this. We have board meetings. We have separate CEO and chairman. We have non-executive directors who may be considered independent, but there is no compulsion to have non-executive directors. The code wants the board to approve annual reports, remuneration strategy,